Hi, folks. Welcome back. It has never been more evident that America is an occupied nation. Yeah, sad to say, but it is true. We have been occupied by a foreign parasitic force, that being the Israeli state. They seem to control most of our cultural and political institutions at this point, so much so that they can literally pressure us into war. And now they are flexing that muscle once again, pouring billions of dollars into influence campaigns designed to reshape the narratives and criticisms surrounding Israel in our media. And that has become so unbelievably transparent that even recently, the Ellisons purchased TikTok and CNN, part of a massive consolidation happening in the media space to enable a form of mass censorship and protection surrounding the Israeli state. We're even seeing people within the DOJ, one of those being Harmeet Dillon, whom, as I talked about a few weeks ago, has a law firm registered under FARA, now threatening legal action against people who are critical of Israel. So increasingly, it feels as though our government has been taken hostage by the Israeli state. America is truly at a crossroads. Once again, we are dealing with a subversive imperialistic force that is ultimately undoing the purpose and will of this nation. And it has never been more evident than at this moment, because as I mentioned, this can be seen at every level, culturally, politically, philosophically, basically everywhere you dare to look for more than 2 seconds. And now, to no one's surprise, even in terms of war, as I mentioned earlier, we're currently entangled in what appears to be another foreign quagmire in Iran on behalf of Israel, to the admission of some of our own leaders. And according to recent reporting, that's not where the war mongering ends, because now it seems as though we have gotten involved in Israel's bombing campaign in Lebanon, which shows that our foreign conflicts are increasingly being decided based on whether or not they serve the interests of Israel, no longer America. That said, I think it's important to start looking at some of the most recent examples of this dichotomy within our government and culture by examining some of the more prominent commentators who have been pushing this Israel first sentiment over America. One of the primary figures of that movement is Ben Shapiro, perhaps one of the most prominent Zionist commentators in America. Ben, who, by the way, has been begging Trump to engage in a deeper war with Iran, a war that even Charlie Kirk himself recognized was unwinnable, a position that likely cost Charlie his life. But let's not delve too deeply into conspiracy theories. Let's just focus on what is directly in front of us. This is Ben Shapiro speaking at a Chabad event about how Trump should escalate the war in Iran.
I'd like to shift over to the Persian Gulf, to Iran, to President Trump's actions or inaction in Iran. How do you envision or understand President Trump holding off a strike on Iran while they continue to build up their weapon systems?
So there's sort of the optimistic vision in my view, and then there's the pessimistic vision in my view, and I have no idea which one of these is correct, because I don't think necessarily the president knows which one he's going to do yet. The president goes with his gut, typically. I think the president's gut so far has been pretty excellent when it comes to Middle Eastern politics, but it's possible that he goes a way that I would prefer that he not go. Obviously, the buildup takes time. There were not the sort of resources necessary to launch the kind of long-lasting strikes on IRGC facilities and ballistic missile bases and military leadership necessary to actually destabilize the regime. And so it takes a while to actually sail gigantic ships halfway around the world and place them in the Mediterranean or in the Persian Gulf. And so there are still ships that are on their way right now. The amount of resources that have been mobilized to the region is extraordinary. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of American fighter jets. You are talking about multiple aircraft carriers. You're talking about an enormous arsenal that has been assembled. Now, whether the president actually decides to pull the trigger on it is really the question. I think it will be a disaster if he does not. I know that he's being told by a lot of people that it will be a disaster if he does, that something terrible will happen. These are exactly the same people who suggested World War III, literally the same exact people who said World War III would break out if he flew one B-2 over one site and hit it with some bombs. And of course, none of that happened. It wasn't World War III. It was actually a very successful military strike. The question for the president, he doesn't like long-lasting military actions. He likes decisive military actions that don't cost a lot of blood and treasure. Hopefully no blood and minimal treasure.
Hopefully no blood, he says. Wow, Ben. Glad to see you take the service of our service members of our military with so much care and dignity. I mean, hopefully, people don't go and die for Israel, folks. Hopefully Americans don't have to go and sacrifice themselves so Israel can expand its empire from the Nile to the Euphrates. Hopefully Americans don't have to go die for another country that they never signed up to go die for. and have literally no connection to. Hopefully, one can only pray, folks. Hopefully someday Americans don't have to go do the will of Israel. Obviously, this is insane rhetoric. This is just genocidal on its face. And I call it genocidal because we have all seen the actions of the IDF. We have all seen how they're treating their neighbors. Lebanon, Gaza, they're flattening country after country, displacing thousands, hundreds of thousands. In the case of Gaza, millions of people, their lives destroyed. Gaza currently has the highest population of child amputees in the world. Same thing happening in Lebanon right now, blowing everything up under the guise of, oh, we have to wipe out this village because they have tunnels. Meanwhile, image after image of the IDF desecrating Christian churches and imagery while they're displacing thousands of people, taking some of the most ruthless and cruel action seen in recent years, all under the guise of, we have to take out Hezbollah, guys. So with all that in mind, is that really what Ben Shapiro wants right now? He wants the American military to be involved in that sort of genocidal, war crime related tactic. Very interesting to see. And by the way, it's interesting that Ben chooses to admonish Trump having any sort of restraint. He admonishes anybody, so it seems, who has any sort of opinion that's contrary to bombing the hell out of any country neighboring Israel. All of a sudden, and if you dare point any of this out, you are now an enemy of Ben Shapiro, the state of Israel, Jews, and you're an anti-Semite. Just because you oppose blood being spilled. Because in case it's not apparent, folks, Ben Shapiro wants blood. He wants a lot of it. He wants it running down into the Nile like Moses hitting that stick in front of the Pharaoh. But really, folks, when is this going to end? What consent has the American public, have American voters, taxpayers given to our leaders and to our government to go and fight this war on behalf of Israel? Why are we doing this? What are we expecting in return? Absolutely nothing. There's nothing we're going to get. We sell Israel weapons. Sure, they pay us back, but that money comes covered in blood, the blood of children, okay? I don't want my tax money funding weapons that are going out and bombing entire villages, especially Christian villages. And I think most Americans would agree with me on that one. None of this is in the interest of America. Ben isn't speaking on behalf of the interests of America, so much so that he's not even trying to make a case to the ordinary American who will listen to this as to why any of what's happening, any of what he's calling for here is in the interest of America. He's not even trying. He's given up. He knows that Israel has this much sway over our government that they don't even have to justify the act of war. Oh, and in case you think that this clip that we just watched was an anomaly, well, brace yourselves. This is something that Ben Shapiro has actively been doing from his podcast chair.
The easiest move for the United States to make right now would be to just blow up Kharg Island. Kharg Island, you could do an amphibious operation there. It's a lot riskier. Or you could just blow it up. And that means that Iran has no refinery capacity. And that means their economy is basically sunk for the foreseeable future, which means the regime has no money to pay its own people.
Again, how does any of this benefit America? Blowing up Kharg Island? What's the benefit? What's the upside? What's the ROI? I want to know. I want to understand, like most Americans, because I thought that we were out there in Iran to take out their nuclear program, and every so often it seems as though the goalposts keep moving. It always becomes about something else. Oh, now we have to take out their economy. Wait a minute, got to take out the Ayatollah first. Hey, how about we just decapitate their entire government? Oh, now we have to take out civilians because there are tunnels underneath them. Oh, you can't see it? Well, that's because we just blew it up. Oh, by the way, don't look over there where we left a bunch of mutilated children. Seriously, when is this nightmare going to end? Because when you have people like Ben Shapiro just casually pitching escalation in the Middle East with Iran from his podcast chair comfortably, like he's ordering a sandwich with his double macchiato at Starbucks, it says a lot. He's saying this is the easiest move for the United States right now. Just blow up Kharg Island. That's the easiest move, really? Easy for who? Easy for the people sitting behind microphones thousands of miles away from the battlefield? How about you just take the first flight over, Ben? Go pick up an AR-15 and fight it. Because this is truly the core of the issue, okay? There always seems to be another justification for escalation with these people, another justification for intervention, another justification for bombing another civilian area into oblivion. And somehow the answer seems to always be more war. And I don't think anybody wants that, Ben. Sorry to burst your bubble, buddy. Which brings us to a conversation that has been unfolding over the last few days. Some members of Congress have requested an inspection of Israel's nuclear arsenal. Now, if you'll remember, this is something that JFK had actually suggested shortly before he was assassinated. Gee, I wonder what the connection is there.
So here are some of the questions that Joaquin Castro is posing on this issue. Maybe this might answer some of your questions. What nuclear weapons capability does Israel have? Has the administration received any assurances from Israel that nuclear weapons will not be used? Has Israel communicated to the United States any nuclear doctrine, any red lines or thresholds for nuclear use in the context of the current conflict with Iran? Has the administration assessed what circumstances could lead Israel to consider nuclear use? What contingency planning has the administration conducted for such a scenario? I mean, we do. Look.
Is there? I'm asking an honest question. Why? I mean, there's been some rumor that says that Israel is going to nuke Iran.
Because it's in the interest of Americans to know if we are funding and militarily supporting a rogue state that is willing to literally nuke their neighbors. That's a conversation that's been going around that many people have been very concerned about since the beginning of this conflict. One of those moments being that moment where Trump literally posted that he was going to wipe out an entire civilization overnight. And that's why nuclear escalation became a part of the conversation at that point. Now, I don't know what Van Jones said when Donald Trump posted that, but nuclear escalation is something that is of concern, especially when you have this state, the Israeli state, that is going into a no-holds-barred war against their neighbors, using so-called terroristic threats as a justification for effectively wiping out entire civilian areas, mass genociding people, ethnic cleansing other areas, while, some of their most rabid supporters are actively calling for the expansion of their state very openly on social media as well as television sometimes. We've seen it before. In fact, we'll see it in a minute. That said, it is perfectly reasonable for Americans to ask that question. It is absolutely reasonable, Mr. Van Jones. And the fact that Mr. Jones actually has to question it, saying, why? Well, because we're funding it, and we should know. In fact, here's a little more context on what's happening with this letter. So 29 House Democrats sent this letter to Trump demanding his administration publicly acknowledge Israel's nuclear weapons program. This letter challenged about 50 years of bipartisan U.S. policy. Washington has known about Israel's arsenal since the late 60s and has chosen deliberately to never say out loud what they know. It's called nuclear opacity, and it allows the United States to maintain strategic cooperation with Israel while avoiding a confrontation with the Arab states. If acknowledged, the NPT framework the U.S. uses to pressure Iran, North Korea, and others could lose credibility overnight. Now, obviously, critics are saying that Democrats are essentially handing Trump a diplomatic grenade and asking him to pull the pin. He will likely not pull it, but the fact that 29 members of Congress are willing to go there publicly tells you a lot about how things have changed. Which brings us back to the original premise. It is perfectly reasonable to ask those questions. And why is that? Well, because if Americans are paying for this, then we can ask as many questions as we want. And we should have full access to all of the information out there. I don't care what the excuse is. I'm sick of the excuses. I'm sick of being told that Americans have to accept anything this rogue foreign state does. I want transparency. I think most Americans deserve it. I think it's in our interests. And I think that anything short of that is a disservice to hardworking Americans who bust their ass only to find out that their money is being shipped abroad to go fund foreign conflicts. And look, yes, I understand how strategically America having nukes in that region is helpful for us geopolitically. But we're talking about a rogue state that's actively genociding their neighbors and getting unconditional support from us. That has to stop. We have to draw the line somewhere. We can't empower these people this much where there are no consequences for literal war crimes. And look, I'd go as far to say that if Israel does in fact have nuclear weapons, perhaps considering their level of aggression with their neighbors, perhaps they should denuclearize. And we could set up some alternate bases, ensure that Israel is safe without having access to nukes, because these people are insane. And by the way, since we're on the topic of Trump, it now appears as though he is calling on Americans to observe the Jewish Shabbat. Yeah, he issued a declaration stating that by virtue of the authority vested in him by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, he hereby proclaims May 2026 as Jewish American Heritage Month. He called upon Americans to celebrate the heritage and contributions of Jewish Americans and to observe the month with appropriate programs and activities and so on and so forth. Look, here's the thing. What exactly are Christians supposed to do with this? This is a Christian nation founded on Christian traditions. Why are Christians being encouraged to observe the religious customs and practices of another faith? I don't want to practice apostasy, and by that I mean Christianity teaches exclusive worship through Christ. Many Christians, in fact, believe that participating in the sacred observances of religious rituals of another faith crosses a theological line and compromises their own beliefs. So naturally, any Christian is going to be uncomfortable when their government, the person they voted for, starts encouraging them and their fellow Americans to observe a foreign religion's practices. I think that is completely, again, tell me we're occupied without telling me we're occupied. And in case you think this respect the president is requesting goes both ways, well, here is another image that is going viral. It shows an IDF soldier, once again in Lebanon, this time desecrating an image of the Virgin Mary next to a Christian graveyard. And at a certain point, folks, people are going to start noticing. We've talked about repeated reports and viral footage over the past few weeks and months involving damage to churches across the region, the destruction of Christian imagery, parishioners being harassed and spit on, attacks involving clergy and nuns, Christian schools being bulldozed, and restrictions placed on Catholic celebrations and masses. And every single time we're told the same thing, that this does not reflect the values of the IDF, that it was an unfortunate mistake, a rogue incident, they say, or just a lapse in judgment. Then there's always supposedly an investigation. The story disappears. It gets brushed under the rug. The public is expected to forget about it as quickly as the next outrageous political controversy comes out of Washington. And in case you're not disgusted yet, I bring you this report that I'm not even going to play the whole thing because it's infuriating.
But it's one of those things that's too horrible to really, like when you first hear it, you're like, I can't wrap my head around this being a real thing. But at this point, it's fairly undeniable. You have documented instances of Israelis using dogs to rape Palestinian inmates. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. This is from Al Jazeera. I'll read the subheads here. They say they came and took one of the other men. They beat him. After they beat him, they forced him to the ground on his belly. They tied his hands and tied his feet. There were about 8 or 9 soldiers. They stripped him of his underpants. A captain came and sprayed something on his backside. There was a dog there. They unleashed the dog on him. The dog raped the young man. It raped him. Literally speaking, rape.
Explain that one. This is supposedly our greatest ally. Is this really who we want to align ourselves with? Is this really who we want to partner, fund their wars, fund their genocides, give them weapons to keep doing this kind of stuff? How utterly disgusting. And look, in case you still think that all of what we've covered today is an anomaly, they're isolated cases, in case you still have not seen the broader pattern people are pointing to, well, here's a clip of Israeli extremist Daniela Weiss saying out loud what many critics believe has been obvious for a very long time.
We will settle Gaza. We will settle Lebanon. We will settle the entire promised land. Thank you very much.
First of all, lady, the only thing you're going to settle is down, because it looks like you're about to bust a coronary from the way the veins are popping out of your neck. By the way, folks, I do hope that it has always been evident to you that this has always been the goal. Anybody who's heard of the Greater Israel Project knows exactly what this is and what we're discussing. This is nothing new. They are hoping to replicate King David's old kingdom, what was given to the Judean tribe in the Old Testament, from the Euphrates to the Nile. That's what this is. That's what they want. That's why the front never ends. That's why there's always this expansionist aspect to the Israeli state. Just think about how they started, folks. They were very, very small. All of a sudden, they got all of Palestine. They're pushing people out of Gaza now. Now they're moving into Lebanon. All while talking about how Turkey is next and they destabilize Iran. This is all by design. If you don't see it, well, I'll tell you what it is. These are imperialistic ambitions. They want to kneecap their neighbors because they want to be able to take everything they feel entitled to. And by the way, this has never been about guaranteeing the safety of Jews around the world. This has always been a bloodlust of an expansionist regime, one that's not even similar to Manifest Destiny. They feel theologically justified in their actions because they believe that in expanding their empire, in establishing this Israeli state, they will bring about their Messiah. And Christian Zionists ally with them because they believe that this will, in fact, trigger the second coming of Christ. It's all a convoluted, accelerationist, psychotic drive to expand this state and effectively bring about the Antichrist and the destruction of the world. And needless to say, none of this is in the interest of Americans. It's not in the interest of our country in the least. Our country is getting involved in horrible war crimes and actions done by this foreign state that could care less about the value of human life, a state that is absolutely antithetical to American values. And by the way, this is something that I wanted to talk about in my America First speech. I ended up not including it because it wasn't relevant, but we've heard many people, Ben Shapiro included, talk about Western values for many, many years. It's a part of the lexicon, Western values. You think of an amalgam of countries that share the same values. What are those values based on? Well, they love to say it's Judeo-Christian values. Well, guess what, folks? First of all, it's Christian values and it's American values. That's what I like. America quite literally fought a war to free itself from Europe. There's no unity in values with Europe or any part of the world. It's American values overall. Our Constitution was, in fact, a repudiation of everything that Europe stood for at the time. Europe ended up later coalescing to American values, and that's a dynamic that we should always abide by. America is the leader. There's no amalgam of Western values. There's only American values. There's only Americanism, and there's only America first. That's really what this all should be about. And these videos that we watched today, and this position from the president, all of it is Israel first, which, as we've seen, is antithetical to Americanism. Anyway, folks, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.